The pink sneaker was not where a child would ever casually leave it. It lay on its side beneath a damp lattice of broken branches and freshly turned leaves, toe pointing back toward the cabin like a silent plea. Mud had crept up the fabric, but a faint glitter still clung to the lace tips. Lily's glitter, the same she had begged her mother to keep even after it started flaking onto car seats and living room rugs. 30 feet behind that rented cabin, 30 feet beyond the world Daniel Sullivan insisted we believe, a small shoe whispered a truth he refused to speak. Nearby, half buried in dark soil, was a torn strip of pale cotton patterned with fading moons, consistent with the pajama top Emma wore in the bedtime photo Daniel posted the night before he dialed 911. And just beyond, a splintered plastic flashlight lay snapped at the neck, its lens spidered and pressed into the earth as though someone had ground it down with the heel of a boot. The forest held its breath as Detective Sarah Chin pulled on a fresh pair of gloves, lifted the sneaker with the delicacy one reserves for a living thing, and felt the tremor of a question she could not yet voice. How long had it lain there, and why had no animal disturbed it? Before we dive deeper into this mystery, subscribe so you don't miss any crucial evidence. Chun radioed for the forensics, Ben, while Rodriguez marked the perimeter with biodegradable tape. Moist vapor rose from the leaf mold, wrapping the scene in a thin veil. The air held the sour tang of decomposing foliage and wet pine, a smell that would fuse forever with the memory of that little shoe. They worked silently, the kind of silence that grows between investigators who understand that words can dull the edge of alertness. Every depressible patch of soil was photographed, every bent fern frond documented. An indentation near the torn flashlight caught Chen's eye, a partial outsole pattern, smaller than an average adult male's, yet broader than a child's, possibly a women's hiking boot or a narrow men's work boot, angled as if the wearer had pivoted sharply. A perimeter sweep located tire impressions where a vehicle had turned in a tight three-point maneuver, its rear axle cutting a deeper channel than the front, consistent with Daniel's aging pickup, known to have a loaded bed the week before. But there was a second, less pronounced tread overlaying the edge, a lighter vehicle or perhaps a trailer dolly. Nothing about this scene felt incidental. Back at the command center, a whiteboard now carried a fresh cluster of photographs under the heading Exterior Woods, Cabin Radius. Side by side, the traffic camera still from 11:47 p.m., the shoe, the fabric, the snapped flashlight. In Part 1 we learned Daniel's timeline collapsed under the weight of that midnight walk. In the abbreviated look at Part 2, we saw the cabin emerge from the shadows of his financial desperation. Now, in this third chapter, each fragment is being braided into a narrative that no longer asks whether Daniel lied, but how far and for how long he engineered a deception that manipulated a grieving community. As dawn filtered pale gray through the station windows, a search warrant team completed a secondary sweep of Daniel's garage. Hidden behind stacked moving boxes labeled winter clothes was a Rubbermaid container, its lid warped. Inside, camping fuel canisters, unopened chemical hand warmers, children's trail mix packets, and an inexpensive set of two-way radios, one missing. A receipt placed the purchase 10 days before the disappearance. The radio's frequency range was limited, yet adequate for cabin-to-woods communication. Batteries from the remaining unit were still shrink-wrapped, suggesting the missing partner radio had been prepped and used. A forensic tech lifted latent prints from the packaging. Preliminary comparison matched Daniel on the exterior, but an unidentified partial print, smaller ridge spacing, likely female or adolescent, appeared near the battery compartment. A smudge, a partial swirl. Nothing conclusive, but enough to widen the investigative lens. While evidence teams cataloged items, Chin revisited interviews. Rebecca's second sit-down had produced a chilling recollection. A week before the twins vanished, Emma asked during a dinner video call if she and Lily could camp at Daddy's secret place again. Rebecca had dismissed it, assuming Emma meant a backyard tent Daniel sometimes pitched for bonding nights. Now the phrase secret place took on a darker resonance. If the girls had been brought to that cabin before, it meant normalization. Any fear would be softened by routine, making a late-night walk appear like an adventure. Chun pulled the digital timeline onto her monitor. She annotated points, October 3rd, radio purchase. October 11th, fuel canisters. October 13th, late-night departure with twins. October 14th, staged 911 call at 6:23 a.m. The pattern hinted at premeditation layered with psychological conditioning. One question pulsed beneath all others. What ultimate outcome did Daniel envision? Neighbors provided additional color. Mrs. Patterson, the insomnia widow whose memory rescued the traffic footage from irrelevance, expanded her earlier statement. In the month leading up to the disappearance, she twice saw Daniel escorting the twins toward the cul-de-sac after 10 p.m., each girl clutching a blanket. She assumed they were meeting their mother for a custody exchange until she realized no vehicle arrived. She mentioned a slender figure standing where the street lamp flickered, a figure she presumed female based on posture. She had never brought it up, fearing misinterpretation. That silhouette became a new phantom in the file, unidentified, possibly integral. For investigators, human behavior is data. Daniel's post-disappearance pattern, press conferences, orchestrated gratitude posts, calculated redirection of media attention, had the sterile sheen of strategy. Yet behind that performance, private financial documents revealed 3 months of escalating debt, maxed credit cards, a pending wage garnishment, a life insurance policy he'd increased on himself, but not on the twins. Why orchestrate disappearance instead of seeking legal relief? Did he intend to vanish with them eventually? Or create a narrative of abduction to weaponize public sympathy in the custody war? An RCMP behavioral analyst joined the task force, compiling Daniel's stress triggers: perceived loss of control, public humiliation during divorce hearings, online criticism accusing him of neglect. Individuals fixated on image preservation often maintain meticulous stage sets, like a neatly removed window screen meant to telegraph an intruder's courtesy rather than frenzy. The analyst noted the emotional vacuum in Daniel's retellings. He repeatedly described logistics. I checked the beds, I opened the window, but rarely invoked sensory details like their warmth, scent, or voice. Absence of sensory language can indicate distance or rehearsed attachment. Not proof, but pattern. Rebecca provided texture impossible to glean from digital forensics. She shared a tender, aching flashback: Emma's habit of braiding Lily's hair before school, even when running late. Lily's fear of deep water after a pool incident, leading Emma to hold her hand in any unfamiliar setting. That bonded dynamic mattered. If one twin was uneasy about a nighttime outing, the other's presence could soothe compliance. Emma often took responsibility for Lily's comfort, so if Daniel recruited Emma with a promise of a surprise or secret game, Lily would follow Emma's lead. Understanding that protective linkage helps decode why neither girl appeared distressed on camera. Cadaver dogs circled the cabin perimeter a second time. One dog alerted briefly near a shallow depression upstream from where the shoe was found, then lost the scent, possibly contaminated or residual. Soil cores were taken. Laboratory analysis later detected trace organic compounds consistent with decomposing biomass, but concentration levels were insufficient to declare decomposition from a human source. Still, the partial alert added urgency. Rodriguez processed the snapped flashlight. Internal wiring showed intentional twisting, not a random break from a fall. The beam assembly had been disabled by removing a micro screw and bending the contact tab, a method requiring small motor dexterity and premeditation. Why disable a flashlight in less darkness was part of the plan. Perhaps to escalate dependency, to direct the girls through selective illumination, or to justify holding their hands under the guise of safety. Parallel to physical forensics, digital analysts reconstructed fragments from a burned phone recovered in a metal container the previous day. Memory chips subjected to chip-off extraction yielded a handful of partial text strings and cached fragments, 2 local numbers, a draft message reading, need confirmation for drop, and a calendar entry labeled October 13th night out with overlay metadata created midday on the 13th, modified after midnight. The phrase drop triggered interagency interest. A drop could refer to exchange, delivery, or clandestine handoff. But of what documents the twins themselves leverage? Without context, the word was a black hole pulling theories inward. Now the narrative thickened. A possible second figure, specialized preparation, coded language. Yet we still stand only halfway across this landscape of uncertainty, each step raising new questions rather than closing loops. If this story is gripping you the way it's gripping me, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Midway through this expanding labyrinth, we revisit Daniel's second interrogation. He entered the room with practiced, weary eyes, shoulders set in a slump that signaled defeat without surrender. Chen placed the printed image of the pink sneaker beside the traffic still. Daniel's pupils constricted. Micro-expressions, a subtle press of lips, eyelid flutter, registered on the recording. "Why was Lily's shoe outside the cabin?" Chen asked softly. "I don't know anything about a cabin," he replied, voice thinned. "She slid a receipt for the cabin deposit across." He glanced at his own signature, then at the room's camera lens, calculating spin. "We went once weeks earlier. A daytime thing. Nature therapy, you know." Chen allowed silence to expand until it pressed. "Why take them out at nearly midnight?" "I didn't." "Who did?" He stared at the table's edge. "People see things that aren't there. Like your intact staging of an abduction." His jaw muscle flexed. "I wanted urgency. Media attention helps. You can't deny that." Here lay a partial admission, not to harming them, but to staging for amplification. A subtle shift from denial to recontextualization. Staging for urgency is still deception. Was he inching toward controlled confession? Outside the room, Rebecca waited in a family liaison office, clutching a folded school drawing of a rainbow the twins had made during a supervised exchange months prior. She asked a single question when Chen emerged. "Are they alive?" Chen could not ethically answer with speculation. She offered presence instead. A grounded, steady gaze that communicated both determination and empathy. We move deeper now into the emotional architecture of this case. Hope is not binary. It frays, reweaves, thins, and knots. Rebecca's hope had transmuted from vibrant certainty to a delicate thread anchored in any fragment suggesting the twins might have been sheltered rather than harmed. The idea of a secret place reinterpreted as temporary refuge rather than endpoint. Yet each item of evidence, the broken flashlight, the burned phone, suggested progressive concealment, not protective seclusion. Community response evolved accordingly. Early vigils radiated collective warmth, songs, soft-spoken prayers. Now public gatherings held an edge, posters demanding transparency, handwritten signs reading "Bring them home, not your story." The pivot from passive empathy to active accountability is common when deception is suspected. Some neighbors posted on local forums that they felt complicit for defending Daniel early on. That secondary guilt can fuel intense online investigative energies. Armchair sleuth threads cross-referencing property tax maps, satellite images of logging roads, historical flood patterns. Chen's media briefings urged restraint, careful not to alienate potential civilian tip sources while discouraging contamination of witness memory through rumor echo chambers. A breakthrough simmered in the laboratory rather than the woods. Fiber analysis from the pajama fragment revealed trace polyester microfilaments with a distinct cross-section seldom used in standard children's sleepwear but common in synthetic blanket throws sold by a specific discount retailer. Inventory records showed Daniel purchased a twin-sized throw matching that fiber type 2 weeks before the disappearance. Why bring an additional blanket if the girls already had comfort items? Possibly to wrap, carry, or insulate them during a nocturnal outing. Or to pad something else entirely. Forensic lint lifts from the cabin chair earlier photographed with a pink blanket produced the same fiber signature, reinforcing occupancy continuity. A child psychologist consulted on the case reviewed Emma's cabin drawing recovered from the attic. The depiction of trees leaned inward at exaggerated angles, a visual encoding sometimes representing perceived enclosure or looming presence in children's expressive art. The house had no windows drawn. Children who feel comfortable in a setting often draw windows and sun elements. Absence can signal either nighttime context or emotional opacity. Emma wrote, "We are not telling beneath one sketch," the phrase underlined twice. The professional cautioned interpretation without direct child interview is speculative, Yet pattern layering again nudged the theory of coached secrecy. Sifting through bank records, analysts found a modest cash withdrawal pattern. Rather than one large withdrawal-inviting trace, Daniel withdrew small amounts every other day across multiple ATMs, aggregating enough to pay the cabin deposit in cash and presumably supply minor purchases. This structuring behavior, deliberate financial fragmentation, betrays forward planning. Meanwhile, a regional trucking dispatcher responded to media outreach and identified the nocturnal trucker who'd glimpsed Daniel's pickup near the dirt access road. In a recorded interview, the driver clarified he also noticed a second light source flickering a short distance down the path, possibly a lantern or a phone held low. Two separate stationary points of light during overlapping time frames increase probability of multiple individuals present. Unless Daniel staged both by leaving a device. Composite mapping placed the secondary light roughly along a line between the cabin and the shoe location, reinforcing forest movement corridor hypotheses. Even as evidence knotted tighter, the emotional core remained tethered to who Emma and Lily were beyond case files. Friends from their class provided anecdotes, Emma organizing a kindness club during recess, Lily making paper cranes for any classmate who cried. The teacher recalled Emma standing up to an older student who teased Lily about mismatched socks. She squared her shoulders like a tiny guardian, the teacher said, voice breaking. These glimpses push against reduction. The twins are not mere subjects of mystery, but vibrant personalities whose agency, trust, and vulnerability were exploited by someone tasked with their safety. This moral dissonance fuels collective grief and investigatory resolve alike. The task force refined a working theory matrix. Scenario A, Daniel's sole planner and executor. Scenario B, Daniel plus unidentified collaborator providing logistical support. Scenario C, Daniel coercively influenced by a third party. Scenario D, false staging preluding an intended relocation that escalated beyond control. Probability weights shifted daily as new microdata arrived. The unidentified boot impression and partial print kept Scenario B afloat. We approach the hinge of this episode, the point where layered suspicion compacts into a sharp thrust of evidence powerful enough to alter both investigatory momentum and public narrative. The attic metal box, initially cataloged for chain of custody, underwent secondary content analysis. Hidden beneath the stack of children's drawings, technicians lifted a thin envelope adhered by humidity to the box floor. Inside rested 3 Polaroids. The first, Emma and Lily seated on a rough wooden step, likely the cabin porch, daylight filtering through conifers. Both wore jackets over pajamas. Temporal mismatch, sleepwear under outerwear during daylight, implies an overnight stay carried into morning or staged clothing. The second Polaroid depicted a hand, adult, masculine, consistent with Daniel's finger-length ratios, holding a compass in the cabin interior beside a steaming mug. The third made Chen's breath falter, a low-angle shot of one twin, Emma, based on a small freckle near her left eye, lying on the cabin floor, eyes open but expression slack, light falling in a narrow stripe across her face, as if a curtain were partially drawn. Her sister's hand reached into frame holding the Tournier stuffed elephant. Emma's pupils appeared dilated. Was she sedated, exhausted, or simply mid-blink captured by still film's unforgiving freeze? Polaroid timestamps, imperfect and chemically variable, place development within a day of disappearance date. This is the moment where tension compresses into revelation. This evidence changes everything. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The Polaroids escalated urgency. If sedation occurred, what substance? Toxicology without a body is hindered, yet environment sampling began, collecting cabin dust, mug residue, fabric fiber. Field tests on the half-empty hot chocolate mugs revealed microcrystalline traces consistent with diphenhydramine, an over-the-counter antihistamine sometimes misused for drowsiness induction. Over-the-counter availability reduces traceability, but leaves metabolic footprints. Footprints investigators still hope to locate through environmental or waste sampling. The sedation hypothesis reframed the girls' calm midnight walk. Premeditated pharmacological compliance could explain absence of flight. Within hours, Media affiliates circulated anonymous source claims about drugging, threatening to compromise evidentiary integrity. Chun held a briefing, tight-lipped, urging empathy and a halt to unchecked speculation. Still, online forums exploded with theories about second actors administering substances, or Daniel coordinating a handoff timed with sedation peaks. Each unsourced assertion risked poisoning witness recall. Yet sometimes the very public swirl flushes out overlooked witnesses. That's when an email tip arrived from a seasonal groundskeeper employed by a nature conservancy abutting the forest. Reviewing his personal wildlife trail camera footage from mid-October, he had installed the camera to monitor deer movement. He noticed at 12:14 a.m. a blurred, tall figure moving along a shadowy path parallel to the cabin property line, a faint reflective strip on the outer seam of what might be utility or hiking pants. No children visible, but the figure's left arm position suggested holding something light and cradled, or perhaps guiding with a hand placed low. The timestamp aligned within 30 minutes of the traffic camera frame. Daniel's known clothing that night, per his own statements, sweatpants and a hoodie, did not match reflective strip description. Without enhancement, identity remained concealed, yet the probability of a second adult presence increased. Rebecca's reaction to the Polaroids was a raw exhale, then silence. She touched, but did not lift, the image where Emma's eyes were open. She looks absent. That's not her normal face. She was always animated. Every fiber of her being seemed to vibrate between hope. Absence of overt distress could mean temporary sedation, not harm, and dread. Sedation implies stripping agency. Why would he need them quiet? She whispered. Community impact swelled again. This time outrage braided with protective fear among parents reconsidering trust frameworks. Schools requested a family safety seminar. Child advocates amplified hotline resources for guardians navigating custody conflicts. Real lives adjusting to a chilling possibility. Deception can coexist with apparent paternal devotion. Inside Interrogation 3, Chun placed the Polaroids before Daniel. He inhaled sharply, the first uncontrolled reaction recorded. "Where did you get those?" he asked, voice thinning. "Why are your daughters wearing pajamas under jackets in daylight?" Chun countered. "We camped. They wanted hot chocolate." "Why is Emma unresponsive?" "She was tired. She sleeps hard." "Did you give them anything to help them sleep?" "No." The denial came too fast, a reflex unbuffered by contemplation. Chun slid a lab report summary across, preliminary indication of antihistamine residue on mug interior. Daniel's eyes flicked, micro hesitation, then narrowed. "Allergies. It's fall. People use medicine." "Did you plan to mislead investigators about the time they left the house?" His jaw clenched. "I plan to make people care faster." The incremental admissions formed a staircase descending toward core culpability. He now conceded staging for amplification. Still shielded motive for physical removal. Chun shifted tactic. Who was the second person in the forest? He blinked. There was no one else. She slid a printed still of the trail cam silhouette. He exhaled through his nose, a near imperceptible sigh of recognition or strategic recalibration. Silence. Then, people hike. "You reserved a cabin, drugged your daughters. Allegedly. Walked them out after 11, staged an abduction, and you expect us to believe a random hiker just happened to be there." He stared at his reflection in the two-way glass, perhaps searching for a version of himself still plausible to the outside world. Chun pressed, lower voice, near confessional cadence. "Did you intend to return them later, after courtroom optics shifted? Or did the plan always end in them not being found?" His lips parted, then closed, as though some internal governor throttled a disclosure at the last second. "You don't understand what they were going to do to me," he muttered. The centering pronoun me. Like a flare in the dark. Rebecca was shown a pixelation of the trail cam figure to prevent memory contamination with possible future lineups. She could not identify the silhouette, but volunteered a chilling observation. Daniel's sister, an infrequent presence in the twins' lives due to geographical distance, owned reflective strip hiking pants she'd worn during a brief summer visit. That sister was currently abroad. Records would need verification. International coordination might follow. Was this a red herring born of desperation, or a real threat? Investigators logged the lead carefully, aware of familial amplification bias. At this stage, the weight of evidence pressed Daniel toward fracture. Behavioral analysts predicted either a controlled partial confession framing actions as protective misjudgment or an escalation of victim posture blaming external systems. Which narrative emerges often guides prosecutorial strategy and future plea negotiation boundaries. We near the final segments of this episode, but before that pivot, the emotional resonance of Emma and Lily's lived experience again deserves space. A babysitter described a twin ritual. They clapped out secret rhythms, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, before bed, a pattern they claimed warded off bad dreams of being lost. It began months after the custody shift intensified. The babysitter assumed it was simply a calming routine, never reporting it. Now, those taps echo retrospectively like a child's intuitive attempt to anchor safety amid adult turbulence. Daylight receded behind layered clouds as Chun prepared for a third interrogation run, this time armed with the antihistamine evidence, Polaroids, trail cam still, and psychological leverage. The narrative of a second adult presence could push Daniel into reclaiming sole control by admitting full orchestration to block an accomplice construct. Offense ownership can paradoxically appeal to a controlling personality threatened by shared credit in a crime narrative. She entered the room slowly, placed nothing on the table, and simply said, "They trusted you." Silence. You can't edit that. Their trust is fixed in the past. What you can edit is how history records what you did with it. Still silence. Was sedation your idea? Were you planning a transfer? Did someone else demand a proof of compliance? His throat worked. A muted swallow. Eyes glistened. Not necessarily grief, possibly stress tears. Physiological outlets when cognitive dissonance peaks. It wasn't supposed to, he stopped. "And," she completed. He stared. "You keep focusing on me. You staged a window. I needed noise. You administered something. They wouldn't sleep. They were anxious. I just wanted them calm." There it was, the first tacit concession to administering a substance, euphemized as calming rather than sedation, but shift nonetheless. She leaned in. Calm for what? His gaze dropped. "I was going to fix things." "How?" No answer. We slide now toward the 90% mark, where the precipice of revelation meets the accelerating heartbeat of a cliff's edge. Help us seek justice for Emma and Lily by subscribing and sharing the story. The interview pause light clicked red. Recording resumed after a mandated break. Chun re-entered with a sealed evidence bag containing the burned phone fragments. She placed them gently down, neither accusatory nor theatrical. "Destroying records doesn't erase intent," she said. "Who were you messaging about a drop?" His shoulders slumped a fraction. "You twist everything," he whispered. "Explain it then." "They were going to take them away." "Who?" "Courts. Her lawyers. Everyone online. I needed a narrative." "Where were you going to keep them?" Again, the internal governor. "Safe," he said. "Where are they now?" Silence. In an adjoining tech lab, analysts completed enhancement passes on the trail cam image using legally permissible contrast algorithms. A faint secondary form emerged behind the tall figure, horizontal lines consistent with a child's striped pajama sleeve at approximately Emma's height. If accurate, it placed at least one twin alive and mobile at 12:14 a.m. deeper into the forest corridor than previously confirmed. That timestamp extends the twin presence window beyond earlier assumptions and undermines any claim of immediate early night harm, reshaping probable sequence, walk, cabin, sedation, deeper movement. Chun received the enhancement still mid-interrogation. She printed it, unenhanced to avoid overpromising clarity, and laid it adjacent to earlier images. "We know at least one was further in the woods after midnight," she said. "If you position them somewhere you believe can sustain them, time is hemorrhaging. Weather sequences degrade viability." His eyes tracked the image edges but avoided the center. "You have no idea," he said, a whisper of defensive superiority, a hint that he still perceived himself as the only architect holding the full blueprint. The path ahead now forks. Does he reveal a location in a bid to recast himself as misguided caretaker rather than malevolent orchestrator, or does he tighten silence? Wagering investigators lack the final coordinate threads. His partial admissions regarding sedation and staging already seed prosecutorial narrative. Each minute he withholds location deepens moral culpability in public opinion. Night pressed against the station windows. Rebecca, refusing to leave, sat tracing the edge of the Polaroid prints with a tissue corner, murmuring apologies into the quiet. That image, her alone with freeze frames of orchestrated secrecy, forms the emotional coda we carry forward. And then, just before recording ended for the night, Daniel lifted his head and asked a question that turned every investigator's stomach into ice. If somebody else moved them after I left, he said, am I still the only one you're going to crucify? Somebody else. The phrase detonated like a flare signaling layered complicity or an attempted displacement. Did he just confirm a transfer point? Was the drop a literal handoff? Or is this tactical diffusion, planting seeds of doubt to bargain later? Chun held her expression neutral. Who moved them? She asked. His lips parted, then sealed again as footsteps sounded in the hall, an evidence runner arriving with a late development from the cabin. Under the staircase boards, previously overlooked due to mud overlay, a small word carved and hesitant, shallow strokes had been uncovered after moisture evaporated. Mom. The M lines were uneven, the O almost a teardrop, then another M pressed harder, as if a child's hand shook. Fresh enough that would fibers remained pale against the darker grain. Hope and devastation fused into a single, electrified chord. One twin had been conscious, aware enough to etch a word, reaching across distance for the person who would never have sanctioned this midnight secret. This story isn't over. Subscribe so you're here when we expose the full truth in Part 4. Because moments after that carving photo reached Rebecca and she collapsed into Chen's arms whispering, "She was calling me," a digital analyst shouted from the lab doorway. They had reconstructed one more fragment from the burned phone's memory. A partial audio file header, corrupted but readable, showed a timestamp of 12:29 a.m. and the first two audible syllables from a whispered voice. It sounded like Emma starting a word that could be Lily or listen. The remainder disintegrated into static. But metadata revealed the file had been manually tagged with a location pin before deletion, coordinates pointing not to the cabin, not to Daniel's house, but to a disused storm drainage access half a mile north of the forest boundary. A place not yet searched. A place where running water, cold and constant, could mask sound and possibly preserve or destroy whatever waited beneath its concrete lip. Did Daniel deliver them there? Did the second figure continue alone? Or did the girls, partially sedated, wander guided by echoing instructions? Let me know in the comments if you think that drainage access point is where Daniel intended a handoff, or if it's a decoy meant to drag investigators away from something hidden closer to the cabin. In Part 4 we go inside that drainage entrance, confront the terrifying artifacts recovered there, and witness the pressure point that finally threatens to crack Daniel's last layer of silence. Emma and Lily's carved plea, MOM, and a fragment of a whisper now guide the next move. Justice is racing daylight. What do you think the whispered syllable was starting to say, and why would Daniel risk carving time for a child if he knew investigators might find it? Let me know your theory below so we can continue pressing forward for Emma and Lily.